Hello YouTubers, and welcome to this review of the Opgal Therm TH. Now the Opgal Therm TH is a thermal camera with a reasonably high resolution which connects to an Android phone. So first off, who are Opgal? I certainly hadn't heard of them prior to them approaching me for this review. Opgal are an Israeli company. They manufacture thermal cores and cameras for security, the military and industrial use, and for aviation. They've been in business for over 30 years and they are the largest manufacturer of thermal cores and cameras outside of the USA. So they certainly are not a small company and they've been doing this for a while. So this camera, which attaches to an Android phone, has got some very interesting specifications. It's got a resolution of 384 by 288, which means it's got over 110,000 pixels. It's got a net D, or its sensitivity is less than 0.07 degrees C. It's got a thermal range of about 0 to 200 degrees C. Its NUC, or non-uniformity correction, is shuttleless. It's got a distance to spot ratio of about 100 to 1, an IFOV of 2.5 milliradians, an accuracy of about 2 degrees or 2%, and then its field of view with its attached camera, which can be changed, is 55 by 41 degrees. So it's a nice wide angle view. It's a 6.8 millimeter camera, but you can attach up to a 35mm camera, which is going to narrow the field of view and therefore also give you far better resolution for the array size in this camera. Now, before we go any further into this review, there are a lot of terms which I've spat out there in terms of specifications. And if you're not aware of what they are or their importance, you might want to watch the video that I did prior to this on how a thermal camera works and these specifications, because that's going to give you a lot of background leading into this review. Now in this review, for one, what I'm going to now adopt is a standard approach of testing this camera and cameras going on forward from this. I've now got the equipment and the ability to test their sensitivity, to understand how accurate they are, how they cater with reading high temperatures, their distance to spot ratio. So we're going to be testing all of that and seeing how well a camera in this format works. So now that I've gone and spat out all those specifications, what would you expect to pay for a camera with those specifications? Now I can tell you, and I'd be intrigued for anyone to come back and point something which is at a lower price point, but you're going to be paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a normal industrial type camera with those specifications, particularly because of the sensitivity and the resolution that this operates at. Whereas this comes in at $2,000. So it's a very cheeky way of me introducing this without shocking you that it's $2,000, because $2,000 for something that clips onto your telephone seems like a hefty price, unless you realize the specifications and performance. Now, is having a high-end core like this, so I say high-end core, it's a mid-range core on a format like this that you clip to your phone. I can tell you now, my initial prejudice point of view is I would rather have a normal camera in my hand. But after using this for a while, I can tell you now there are certainly benefits to this format. In particular, ease of use of using the menus and setups on a camera like this, sharing information. As soon as you've taken a picture or a video with this phone, you can share it via your messaging in the phone or upload it to the cloud, a shared drive in the cloud for sharing. So those capabilities on cameras now are becoming increasingly more important, so that if you are somewhere on a job site, you could be away from your main head office, you could be on the other side of the world, and you're imaging something important, that can be shared with people back in the head office wherever they are, and they can then start analyzing that straight away. But anyway, let's get this onto the bench and have a closer look, and then we'll look at how well it performs in the real world. Before I start showing you the physical layout and what this comes with, I'll just mention that there are two other cameras in the Therm app range. So there's the one below this, which is just the Therm app, which is more of a night vision camera, a kind of high resolution night vision camera. Then there's this Therm app TH, which is a proper radiometric thermal camera that operates at 8.7 Hertz. And then you get the Therm app HZ, and that is a higher speed camera which operates at 25 Hertz. Although if I recall correctly, that camera, the temperature range that it measures up to is 0 to 90 degrees, whereas this is 0 to 200 degrees. So the first important thing to chat about is the fact that you require an Android phone. I think you require Android 4.1 or above. I'll annotate the screen with those specifics. But the most important part is your Android phone needs to have OTG or on-the-go USB. So I think that's USB in the host mode. If it doesn't have that, it's not going to work with that. And I was caught off guard because the phone that I was going to use with this was the Samsung Galaxy S5 Mini. Now, there's a compatibility list, and on the compatibility list, the Galaxy S5 does have on-the-go USB, whereas the S5 Mini doesn't. It just happens to be that odd model that doesn't. So I went out and I've got this LG G3. Now the LG G3 is great. It's got a nice big screen. It works really well with this because it's got a nice high resolution screen. So you need to be aware that your experience with these cameras in terms of your view from a screen point of view is going to differ depending on the type of phone that you've got. So you just need to be aware of that. Right, so I'm going to undo this phone just so you can see how it all hangs together. It's got this handle which straps on, which of course makes it really handy to use like a normal thermal camera. That unscrews really easily. It does have a handy stud in the bottom so that you can place it on a tripod. The one thing I'll note is that you'll see that it's almost double recessed. You've got this initial flange and then the thread is still below that. And there is one of my tripods where the thread couldn't actually reach that. I had to use another tripod with a thread to actually reach that. So that might be something that they might want to change in a later iteration. But otherwise, a really nice, it's got a kind of rubberized feel, doesn't feel cheap at all. A nice rubberized top to stop the camera slipping sideways. Then you've got this mounting system, this little vise, if you will, which actually grips around the phone. That, if I recall, opens from anywhere from 5 centimeters to 10 centimeters. So the G3 certainly isn't a small phone, and there's a lot of extra room. If I wind this open, you'll see there's a fair lot of extra room that this can open up to. My advice with this is that you'll see you've got these little rubber pads which grip the phone. This is a very well made article. I'll show you right now, but this could have a fair bit of clamping force, and you need to be careful with how much force you're going to clamp it to a phone. I found that this phone with the kind of slick metal or plastic sides, I had to tighten it really tight to stop it slipping around. So you want to have a kind of rubber buffer or put it in a protective case like I've got, then that grips very nicely and quickly with the support system in the camera. You do have a cable, we'll talk about that. But then this business end of the camera, the core and what have you, is really nicely engineered. It's got a metal construction here, really nice solidly made piece for gripping onto the phone. It's not going to kind of hang around off the port. Things like the Seek thermal clips straight into the port and can potentially dangle around, and whereas this gives you a nice secure connection onto the phone. But that does mean, because it's not directly connecting to the port or using, let's say, Bluetooth or wireless to connect to the phone, you do have this cable that's connected. But I've actually not found that an issue at all. The Thermap does come in a very nice case. It's a kind of zip-up case with some nice padding inside. The camera fits nice and snugly into the case with the handle. The lens has got a very nice protective cap, so that covers over the lens. It does come with 3 on-the-go cables, so depending on the size of your phone and the layout, they've got ones with kind of straight USB connectors or ones which are bent at 90 degrees. So something hopefully that'll certainly fit your phone. It comes with a nice, easy to understand manual, and of course there's literature on the internet as well. In part 2 of this video, I'm going to demonstrate the software, because the software can be a real critical part to the hardware. Once you've got the images and you want to analyze it, how easy is it to use and how capable that software is. And in the manual, you'll receive a link to where you can go and register and get your free software download. So you're not paying extra for the software, it does come with it, but you just have to provide your details, your serial number, so you can get it. So just before we fire it up, I just wanted to highlight that it's a 384 by 288 microbolometer. It's a long wave IR, so that's 7.5 to 14 microns is the wavelength. And then you've got the 6.8 millimeter lens, which is interchangeable. The focus range is 0.6 meter to infinity. The other thing I wanted to highlight, besides that you need USB on the go, Android 4.1, is that it's going to use just under half a watt. And that is one of the compromises we'll talk about, is that you're now using your phone battery when you're doing thermal imaging, but we'll see how that plays out. Once you've got this connected up, of course you don't need to connect the handle to this. You could just have it on the phone and hold it in front, but I must say the ergonomics of having the handle make it far easier to use. We'll then simply slip it in, give it a little squeeze, and it's held there nice and securely, and simply put the USB cable in. And then you're ready to go. On your phone, you simply go to the Google Play Store and you search for Therm app and you download the application. Double click that and you fire up and you've got your infrared camera operating. It certainly makes sense to go and read through the instruction manual for this. The operation of the controls, if you understand these settings for a thermal camera, are fairly straightforward. But because you've got your interface on a phone, there's certain things which can make it operate a little bit easier. For instance, if you want to go full screen, you just simply double tap and then you get a full display. Double tap again and then you get your menus by the side. You've got your temperature span and the palette on the side over here, which can easily lock if you need to go and set things. And again, in the video that I previously did, I show the value of being able to easily make changes on something like this. So you can go lock your span for something that you're looking at so that something else in the environment doesn't interrupt what you're trying to target or measure. Now this is where I had a real wake-up call, because I was thinking that having an application on a phone was going to be fiddly and maybe not as reliable. But again, from the previous video, you'll have seen where something, let's say a more industrial layout, a dedicated device which isn't running on a phone. I had this FLIR E4, and during that video, the application actually crashed on this and required me to restart this device. So even though you may have a so-called industrial kind of style device, it doesn't mean it's immune from the application crashing and things going awry. Also, once you want to get into the menu and change settings like emissivity, changing the span on the side for the palette, changing the palette, in comparison, it's a dog to do that navigation. And I'm not just merely pointing at the FLIR in this case. The Fluke and other cameras, all the ones that I have in my possession so far, when you try and get into the menu system to simply make a change, for one, it's far more cumbersome, and many times you don't have the flexibility to go and set exact settings. As an example, on those cameras, you can lock the span that your palette's going to work across, the temperature range. But on this camera, I can specifically go and note what I want that span to be, which you cannot do on those other cameras. And as I found, this is a really powerful feature. If you want to change emissivity settings, it's a simple tap over here to go into the emissivity. It brings you up with a nice little dial which you can flick through and then go and set. Once you've got the right setting, set that. It also gives you a setting to set your reflected temperature in case you're on a really reflective metal surface, which could be reflecting environmental IR. Going to have a look at the other menu settings. You've got your main menu button up over here. Depending on how you're holding your phone, whether it's that way or up this way, will depend on the orientation of how the menu opens up. You've got your imaging mode. We've got thermography. I'm going to demonstrate. Thermography gives you your radiometric information. You've also got a night vision mode. Now in that mode, you go to where you get a more plain hot white on black with no temperature information. It's supposed to give you a kind of higher, more clear picture for doing night vision at night. When you don't need the thermal information, you're just kind of looking for things at night or trying to observe things at night. I've done some various tests and I'll show them to you a little later. I don't know that you gain any great improvement by using the night vision by, let's say, going on the gray scale of the normal thermography mode. But on the night vision, you then get your various color palettes. So you've got white hot, you've got black hot, so you can decide which is your hot temperature, either the white or the black, rainbow and iron. Going to the thermography modes, you've got your palettes, you've got several palettes, and say this is personal preference. I have noticed though that depending on the palette, you may get some different details coming out in a thermal image. So it can be personal, or you might want to change those palettes when you're looking at something where you're trying to discern perhaps a really subtle temperature change between two objects. But you've got iron vivid and then your grayscale. As I said, the grayscale one is an interesting one to use at night. When you perhaps your brain, I think the one thing at night, if you're using night vision, having the rainbow colors showing the temperature gradients can be a bit baffling to the brain if you're just trying to spot objects. Whereas going grayscale or the night vision mode just gives you two basic colors with a bit of grading in between. It's far easier for your eye and your brain to decipher if you're just searching for objects and not trying to see what the temperature is. You've then got this thing which says temperature measure, and that dictates the sight on the screen. So here I'm going to pull out, I think there's an improvement they can make on this application. You've got your sight on the screen, which you'll see it's got the temperature. Now most cameras just have the crosshairs, and then up to the side will have the temperature reading. Now I found that ergonomically this is quite nice because I'm not kind of looking here and then referring up to see what the temperature is. However, sometimes I found this tag got in the way of what I was looking at. So you can go into the menu system, and where it says center, I can set it to none. Go back in, and then I haven't got that temperature reference. I wish they had another option where it said off to the side, where you put the tag up here, but you still have your crosshairs. So that would be a simple change. Now the other powerful feature of having a camera like this, an Opgal also have an open API so that developers can develop their own applications. So if there's a company with their own specific application where they want to make use of the hardware but write their own application, they're able to do that as well. So that's another powerful feature. We'll turn the target back on. You've then got your thermography settings, and this is where you can change between your units. You've got Celsius and Fahrenheit. You've got your emissivity setting, which you can get to quickly from the main screen, your reflected temperature, and your scale truncation. Now, scale truncation, your camera is going to look across the field of view and decide the scale on the side, the temperature scaling. And you can set the percentage of pixels that it's going to use to dictate that, to either make it more sensitive in the way it selects that scaling on the side. So that can be a really handy feature. All of these have got nice graphical overlays. What I did note, so this is really nice and easy for changing the settings. However, when you've got it up in this landscape mode, you can see at the bottom here, it's got the buttons are a little bit cut off. So it's very difficult trying to get there to actually make that setting. It's far easier when it's up in the portrait mode, then those are fully displayed. So again, it's just a bit of a graphical user interface change they could do there to make this slightly smaller so that you can get to these buttons a little easier. In the general settings, you've got the option to enable audio when you record, because you can do video recordings and you can either have the audio on or off. You can have a watermark on the photos that you're taking. You can disable the screen timeout. Raw data annotation, so when you take a picture, it'll bring up a window on the screen allowing you to add an annotation on the photo that you've just taken. And then you've got an option to record while you're streaming. In the export and save options, you've got two places here. You can either save to the media folder, which is the media folder on the phone. And there you can specify your IR photo, a screenshot, and include a color photo. Or you can save to the export folder. The export folder is the one that's going to be used by the analysis software on your PC. You've then also got cloud accounts, so you can link to a Dropbox account and have things automatically go there so that someone remotely can retrieve that and start analysis while you're away from, let's say, the head office and at the job site. Just as an example, just to show you what happens if you do take a shot and you ask for a color photo as well, this is quite handy. Some of the other cameras, of course, have image blending, which helps you identify where you've taken a photograph. But on this, if I go into my gallery, inside the gallery, you'll see I've got two thermal photographs, one with a targeted temperature. This happens to be where I've been leaning on the bench right now. I've been leaning on the bench, and that has been the front of the camera on the bench. and there it's got a normal photograph, so you can see where this was taken. So it's obviously really handy, even though this has got a really high resolution camera and you pick out a lot of detail in the thermal image. It's always handy to have a real photograph taken as well with the phone camera. Then one of this other settings is maintenance, and the maintenance one will allow you to run a bad pixel repair. As I noted in the video leading into this on how a thermal camera works, the process for manufacturing cores, you've got microscopic components on that core. You've got very thin film resistors which are across that core doing the temperature measurement. They're not uniform, hence the calibration process I spoke about, and you can have pixels which are bad. And this will run a bad pixel repairs, where so it'll scan to see if there are any bad pixels, and then what it'll do, if that pixel cannot take a measurement, it'll use surrounding pixels to guess what that pixel value should be. On the camera main screen, the options that you've got that little icon there, that'll open up your gallery, the actual media placed on your phone. So you can decide what your default gallery is and then go and look at all the thermal images and videos that you've taken. You've then got this little shutter image that takes a picture. So if I click that, it'll actually come up and say that it's gone and captured an image. If I've got the normal photo mode enabled, it's then used the camera on the phone as well to take a normal image. You've got your video button on the phone. This then is capturing video and audio as well. Obviously I can disable the audio if I don't want that. And then this last button is a streaming button. So you can stream this live off to an application or something like Google Plus or perhaps YouTube. So if you want to have someone watching the camera while you're doing a live stream of some images, or perhaps a problem which you want someone else to share. So in terms of the flexibility this has in terms of sharing data, because it's on a platform like a cell phone, is a real plus. I've also noted that the lenses, you can focus this, which is really handy, but it's critical that you do focus this each time so that you do get the correct temperature reading when you want to take an image. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of this kind of platform versus, let's say, a more traditional platform in, let's say, like a Fluke or a FLIR. So if we were going to do, let's say, a comparison, the pros and cons of these two formats, I'll highlight that this is the FLIR E4. If you wanted comparable specifications, you'd have to go to the FLIR E8. And even the FLIR E8 doesn't have the kind of resolution that this does. The FLIRs have a nice field of view, but this is an even wider field of view. And of course, you can then interchange the lenses. If I wanted to really improve the range or distance to spot ratio or measurement, I could change this to a 35mm lens, whereas you've got fixed lenses on the FLIRs. However, if you're kind of in a more rough industrial environment and your camera you might need to put your camera down or what have you, the normal package that, let's say, the FLIR or the Fluke come in are far more robust. You're going to put them around and be able to handle them far more roughly than you are your perhaps delicate phone. The actual camera on the phone, I think, is going to handle a reasonable amount of abuse. It is a nicely built, robust unit, but your phone is the risk here. Also, these have their own batteries, which are going to last several hours. I forget, I'll annotate on the screen. But here you're relying on the battery inside your phone. So just to give you a rough idea, with this LG G3, this supposedly uses just under half a watt. Yesterday I was testing this and I was using this for roughly an hour. In that time, my phone went from something like 95% down to about 60%. So this phone still, at the end of the day, the battery's fairly good. I still had 50 or 55% of my phone battery left. But that certainly is a consideration. If you're going to be doing several hours of taking images, that might be an issue. You might need to have a charger on hand for your phone, because you're not going to be able to supply power to your phone because you've got this in the USB port. The interface driving the various settings on this in comparison to one of these cameras is very different. And I'm particularly picking on the Fluke. It's just one of the cameras I'll just demonstrate. If you want to go and set or lock your temperature span on the side, you've got to go and push a button, go into the on-screen measurement, go into the menu system, navigate through that, go down to range, go down, set to manual range, select that, and that doesn't give me the capability of specifying what I want that range to be. I have to have got that pointed in an environment where I want to lock it at that range, because you cannot specify it. You lock it, you then say done, you back out, and then it's locked, and then you're in a manual mode. Whereas on this, it's literally just a couple of taps to open this up, that would have it locked because it's now pinned to that temperature span. And if I, of course, wanted to make custom changes, it's very easy to use this dial that in, and then I'm there. If I want to go back to an automatic mode, I simply unpin both ends of the temperature span and you're there. You're not fiddling around trying to navigate with the keys. It's a huge difference between the two. So let's get down to the actual testing. So the first thing I want to demonstrate is the field of view. Now the camera with the other widest field of view that I have is the FLIR E4. The FLIR E4 sits at 45 by 34 degrees, whereas the Opgal sits at 55 by 41. And if you can see the trellis work of the lighting stand above my bench, the Opgal has got a noticeably wider field of view. So as I turn these around, you can see that board takes a while to come into the image. Now looking at these two images, you may think, but hang on, the FLIR looks quite nice and crisp and perhaps the resolution's better. But note the noise, so the thermal sensitivity is lower on the FLIR. I'm using its edge detection mode to help enhance the low resolution of that thermal image. Whereas the Opgal, that is purely thermal image, which is able to pick out all that detail. If I go onto the FLIR and I switch it just to purely a thermal mode, you'll see how it loses all that resolution. So the nice crisp edges disappear and you'll actually see a fairly noisy image. And that's the nice difference that you have with a higher resolution camera. When we get to the buyer's guide and we're comparing these side by side, what I'm going to do is drop lines down. At a certain distance, I'll drop lines down so we can clearly see the fields of view of all the cameras. So the first thing we're going to test is to see that sensitivity test. Now it notes that it can sense a temperature of 0.07 degrees C, so that it's at its better end. We want to see at around 0.1 or 0.2 degrees. Can you observe a temperature differential on the display? So I've got two Peltier elements strapped side by side. I've got the warm face of the one facing forward and the cool face, and I can control to 0.1 of a degree the temperature across those. That's being measured on this digital thermometer down here, which I've got calibrated. I've got it so it's measuring the temperature differential between T1 and T2. So if I go to T1, we'll see it's at what, 25.6, and T2 25.6, fluttering around a little bit. So if we look at the differential, it's roughly on 0. Just to demonstrate how sensitive this is, if I blow against this, you'll see it induces a temperature change. So that'll come back eventually, and you'll be able to note the temperature differential and whether we can see it with the camera. All I'm passing through the Peltier elements is about 5 milliamp, and that will slowly but surely, you'll see the temperature differential is now changing between the two sides that we're measuring to get a 0.1 degree. And we're going to see from that point, can I discern a 0.1 degree difference? Right here where my finger is where the join is between those two Peltier elements. Now at the moment I've got them switched off so we can see what it looks like when there's no temperature differential. And this is what I wanted to highlight. Here we've got this tag showing me the temperature measurement at the crosshairs. And here it's getting in the way, and that's where I wish I could move it off to the side. Now for this exercise, it's a qualitative test. It's not a quantitative test. We're not looking for the measurement value. We're just trying to discern a difference. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch that off so it's out the way, and I'm going to use a pinch and zoom so we can come in closer. So now our two blocks are sitting there, and what we're hoping to see is a line form between those as I change the temperature. So I'm going to sit and change the temperature differential to where I think I can discern that difference, and then we'll have a look down and see what that is. We've got the temperature differential of just 0.1 degree difference between those two Peltier elements now. I'll bring you up to the display, and you can perhaps just see in the screen there that there's this like darker spot over there. We'll use the pinch and zoom. And if I bring you into that, you'll probably just discern that line between the two, and that's the join. I'm just going to put my finger in front on the display just where that line is, and it's just about over there. That is the one edge. This is the other edge. You can see very slightly in the display, but you would have to know what you're looking for to pick up that slight difference in temperature, but that's the level of sensitivity that this does go down to. By comparison, I'll bring up the Fluke Now the fluke sensitivity is, I think, about only half this. And if I move the fluke around, you can perhaps see, you'll see the image is a lot more noisier. It has got less sensitivity. If I move it around, you can just perhaps see that darker patch, which is the target of the two Peltier elements. But trying to discern a clean line between the two of those with all that noise, very difficult. And that's what the better sensitivity can give you. You'll have also noted, as I've got the fluke here, you might have heard that shutter going on and off, and it freezes every now and then while it does a uniformity calibration or correction. There we go, it does that. It freezes and then it comes back. It takes about a second, and you'll see none of that happens with the Therm app. So I'm just going to dial things up a little bit just to see when it comes a little bit easier to discern than for a target that we'd be able to visibly pick out rather than us knowing that the target's there. I've been playing around with the temperature to see where I could get a discernible difference. Here you can clearly see the two Peltier elements next to each other and the line that's formed between them because of the temperature differential. The one is slightly warmer, the one is slightly cooler. So the one will be 0.2 degrees difference, which gives you a differential of 0.4. So at 0.4 degrees, that in my opinion is when I have a target that I can really discern. So if I didn't know that target was there and I was slowly sweeping across, I should be able to see that. You can just see the edge of the board over there. I'll just pinch and zoom so we get a little closer. And what I do want to do now is just play around with palettes, just to demonstrate some of the differences. So that was rainbow, this is iron. So you'll see you'll get these different effects, and to my eye they can create a difference in terms of how easy or how difficult it is to discern what's going on. Now I will tell you that my camera is not really picking up some of the definition that I can see looking directly at this phone rather than looking through the lens of my camera. Let's go one more. We'll go to what they call the vivid. It looks a bit noisier, but you can see a nice contrast there using the vivid. The grayscale. And here I've just turned up the contrast on my camera a bit. And there on the grayscale you get a fairly nice contrast. Now I want to go to the night vision. And to tell you the truth, between my eye, I prefer using the thermography method with the grayscale than the night vision. Just out of interest, we got this hot red and cold blue. You can specifically go and set a temperature gradient at which you wanted to do a flick. So here I've got a little dial. I could then go and specify that anything above, in this case, for instance, the temperature change is happening around 21, 22. So I could say set this to 30. And anything above 30 degrees that comes into the picture then goes hot red. So if I pull my hand in, for instance, the parts which are above 30 now start to be highlighted in hot red. If you try to observe or monitor a particular change and you want that highlighted, you could specify that with this. So if I take that a little bit lower, it maybe be a bit more obvious. As I bring my hand in, my whole hand then is highlighted as red because it's above that temperature gradient. Okay, in part 2, what we want to do is we want to test how accurate the actual temperature measurements are. We want to test its distance to spot ratio by providing it with a small target area and seeing how far away it can still make accurate measurements. And then we'll also look at the PC-based software for analysis of the thermal images. Hello YouTubers, and welcome to this review of the Opgal Therm TH. Now the Opgal Therm TH is a thermal camera with a reasonably high resolution which connects to an Android phone. So first off, who are Opgal? I certainly hadn't heard of them prior to them approaching me for this review. Opgal are an Israeli company. They manufacture thermal cores and cameras for security, the military and industrial use, and for aviation. They've been in business for over 30 years and they are the largest manufacturer of thermal cores and cameras outside of the USA. So they certainly are not a small company and they've been doing this for a while. So this camera, which attaches to an Android phone, has got some very interesting specifications. It's got a resolution of 384 by 288, which means it's got over 110,000 pixels. It's got a net D, or its sensitivity is less than 0.07 degrees C. It's got a thermal range of about 0 to 200 degrees C. Its NUC, or non-uniformity correction, is shutterless. It's got a distance to spot ratio of about 100 to 1, an IFOV of 2.5 milliradians, an accuracy of about 2 degrees or 2%, and then its field of view with its attached camera, which can be changed, is 55 by 41 degrees. So it's a nice wide angle view. It's a 6.8 millimeter camera, but you can attach up to a 35mm camera, which is going to narrow the field of view and therefore also give you far better resolution for the array size in this camera. Now, before we go any further into this review, there are a lot of terms which I've spat out there in terms of specifications. And if you're not aware of what they are or they're important, you might want to watch the video that I did prior to this on how a thermal camera works and these specifications, because that's going to give you a lot of background leading into this review. Now, in this review, for one, what I'm going to now adopt is a standard approach of testing this camera and cameras going on forward from this. I've now got the equipment and the ability to test their sensitivity, to understand how accurate they are, how they cater with reading high temperatures, their distance to spot ratio. So we're going to be testing all of that and seeing how well a camera in this format works. So now that I've gone and spat out all those specifications, what would you expect to pay for a camera with those specifications? Now I can tell you, and I'd be intrigued for anyone to come back and point something which is at a low price point, but you're going to be paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a normal industrial type camera with those specifications, particularly because of the sensitivity and the resolution that this operates at. Whereas this comes in at $2,000. So it's a very cheeky way of me introducing this without shocking you that it's $2,000, because $2,000 for something that clips onto your telephone seems like a hefty price unless you realize the specifications and performance. Now, is having a high